Our final speaker, Anat, you can give the FM to Tamar. Our final speaker, Dr. Tamar Taub, right here from our School of Social Work at the Hebrew University and the School of Occupational Therapy and Ono Academic and other lists of places. Using the prism of space, time, and relationality in interviews with adolescents who use augmentative and alternative communication.
No pressure bringing the last speaker of today, which is why I'm going to be reading so that I can be coherent and stick to the time. We'll try. Okay, so I know the aim of my talk is to try and examine methodological aspects of time and space while interviewing people who use augmentative and alternative communication, otherwise known in short as AAC. But I cannot start without peeking together with you on this qualitative research that was part of my PhD thesis under the supervision of the wonderful Professor Shirley Wagner here at the School of Social Work and Social Welfare of Hebrew Youth. So, in a nutshell, my research examines self-determination and autonomous decision-making of adolescents with a disability. Specifically here, I set out to interview adolescent AAC users, and for those of you who are not familiar how this is done, I will shortly show you a couple of videos. Since I was curious to hear and learn from their personal life experiences, I decided that I would interview teens who can independently type via laptop, iPad, or eye gaze communication system. What was I thinking to myself? Matt had to, I was saying this is impossible, and the man had to say, only if you believe it. So I did believe it. I thought it was pretty impossible, but absolutely crucial. This is a very specific population within all of AAC users because the majority of AAC users use closed symbol systems to communicate. But because I wanted to hear personal life experiences, I didn't want to make up a board with symbols or words that I decided on, but rather wanted to receive a genuine response to open questions, which I asked my participants during these interviews. So in total, I interviewed 9 adolescents aged 11 to 19 and 7 parents of AAC users. There were 5 dyads of mother-child who were interviewed separately. And in terms of disability, 4 of the adolescents were quadriplegic with cerebral palsy, 2 had spinal muscular atrophy, SMA type 1, and 3 had autism. Okay, so when I ponder about time and space, concerning the methodological aspect of my research, I think of time and space within social context and social relations. And shortly, I'll expand why I think these are important to consider. So the aspect of time stands on its own, as opposed to space that I find right to divide into 2 sub-aspects that include personal space, mainly of the interviewee, but also of the interviewer, and the interpersonal space that exists between the interviewer and the interviewee. So where do we start? Again, from Alice. Would you like an adventure now, or shall we have our tea first? So usually, when we come about to interview people we have no previous acquaintance with, we make small talk and then try to get to know each other a bit before we start the interview. But in this case, not having previous acquaintance means you need to find out before the interview how each of these teenagers feel comfortable communicating. And as an interviewer, to make sure I am familiar with the ways of communication that they use. So in addition, we have to consider also that it isn't easy to make small talk with people who have complex communication needs. The majority of teenagers I interviewed initially preferred to use speech, if that was possible. But me, not being familiar with their jargon, I was challenged in understanding almost all of what was said and had to request to type what they were saying. Typing constituted an extreme effort for all my participants. It was physically challenging and very time-consuming. Considering space in its basic essence, the interviews took place either at home or at school. As I walk into each of these settings, I first look and see if my interviewee sit in a wheelchair or is he mobile. There's a need to respect that personal space, to make sure that space is respected. When considering the interspace between me and my interviewee, I ask myself, where's the best place to situate myself? I don't want to be too close, but neither too distant. It's important to create a comfortable and respecting setting for the interview to take place. Sitting across from my interviewee enables eye contact between us, but there's a need to see the screen being used for typing in order to enable an efficient conversation. I'm better off seating myself near my interview, trying to find that just right position to be able to see what he or she is typing, but also to enable us to make eye contact. So let's have a glimpse of the way Jake types to understand better the issue of position and space while interviewing AAC users. And I just want to say off record that in my proposal, I did write that I was going to audio tape and videotape my interviews. But when coming into a space without knowing my interviewees, I felt very uncomfortable asking to videotape, so I didn't. Which is why I asked requests from 2 of my interviewees now to just show how they type so that we could get an idea of what it looks like. Okay, so this is just an example for whoever isn't familiar. It's one way. There are many ways. But he uses the tip of his nose to type, and then once you're finished typing, there's a reader that reads out loud whatever it was that he typed. So that's one. Wait. Okay, before I show this. Another major issue that I came across that had to do with feelings of trust between me and mainly the autistic teens I interviewed. There is a gap between what the eyes see and the wonderful minds of these teens. So I'll just give you an example of Johnny, okay, and the way he types to demonstrate what it looks like. Okay, so you can see here one of the aides at school is giving Johnny proximal support at shoulder level to enable Johnny to type. I interviewed Johnny at home. He sat next to his mother, who gave him that same type of support while he typed on the iPad. The first thing he said to me, typing his message, was, "Good, you've come. I see you have a gentle appearance." Throughout their interviews, many of the adolescents mentioned the doubting vibes they felt from their surroundings regarding their ability to type and to express their personal feelings. With every interview I carried out, there was a need to create a feeling of trust, and only then could we continue to discuss the various questions I raised regarding their personal experiences. So the presence of trust is crucial within that interpersonal space that exists between me and my participants. Okay, and this is another quote. "Well, now that we have seen each other," said the unicorn, "if you'll believe in me, I'll believe in you." And I think that's, in a nutshell, what this means. Wait, before we get to this. Okay. So you can see here, another very important issue regarding the interpersonal space between people with complex communication needs and their human surroundings regard their need for support. All the teens I interviewed are dependent on their carers for most, if not all, of their daily function. This doesn't in any way mean that they're not able or entitled to autonomy. Laura Davy explains in a wonderful manner the rationale for what she calls relational autonomy. Agency and autonomy of individual persons can only emerge relationally through the support and enablement of others. An alternative relational conception of autonomy has been developed by feminist theorists, highlighting the importance of social context and social relations So here you see is why I mentioned at the beginning that when I think of my circles, they're within social context and social relations. David continues to explain, people are unable to develop into self-determining individuals without a nourishing environment, or to be autonomous without the support of others. So when considering individuals with complex communication needs, a crucial part of their nourishing environment is to enable their self-determination and autonomy, and their self-determination and autonomy takes into consideration their conversational partners. Communication is an interpersonal process. For young AAC users, this process is created in partnership with parents who know their child best and can voice their needs and choices to others. Their personal aides at school and their personal carers are also familiar with nuances of body language, gestures, etc. As they grow older, this circle of conversational partners expands a little. So here comes the question regarding the interpersonal space during interviews and the presence of familiar conversation partners. I offered all the okay. שותפי שיחה? כן, בול. כן, זה זה. כן, לא, שותפי שיחה וזה. כן, היה כתוב לך שם, כתבתי, בסדר? Okay. So I offered all the teenagers I interviewed the choice of being interviewed on their own or together with a familiar conversational partner so they could be understood like they'd like to be. 4 of the teenagers chose to be interviewed by themselves. 4 who were interviewed at home chose to have their parents at their side, one parent. And 1 teenager who was interviewed at school chose to be interviewed together with her school aide. Within this interpersonal space, there's the presence of previous experiences of not being understood. I had asked Jake, which was the one you saw that types with the tip of his nose, during our interview, what happens when he isn't understood by others. He mentioned how life experience has made him make a personal decision of trying twice to clarify his message, and if not understood the second time, he gives up and moves on. I asked him how that makes him feel, and shortly he commented that it sucks, but that he's used to it. In Hebrew, basa, zover. So apropos the interpersonal space, and here we already relate to time as well. It seems that our request from AAC users to clarify themselves is not something common among people who are not disabled. It's as if we don't allow that vagueness to be present when conversing with people with complex communication needs. So as I mentioned, the time it takes to type a message doesn't compare in any way to the time it takes us to relay that same message when talking. Time takes on a totally different meaning during interviews like these. I would like to mention the term crib time that we heard yesterday in Yifat's talk and relate to it from additional perspective to what we heard yesterday. So I take what I use for crib time from, I don't even know how to say the name because I think it's Swedish, but I'm not sure how to say it. Adva, Linder et al., whatever, whoever's with, but I just want to give credit for whoever it was. So crib time challenges ableist normativity. It recognizes diverse bodies and minds by redefining time. So rather than bend the bodies and minds to meet the clock, crib time bends the clock to meet disabled bodies and minds. Crib time is a recognition that people move, think, and speak at a different pace to the normate. Regarding my interviews, there was a clear need to redefine the expectations of the length of the interviews themselves and the amount of speech that was considered to be a complete and rich interview. Who defines how long an interview takes with people with a disability? Can we define how long an interview should be? And as disability study researchers, do we want to define the length of the essence of qualitative interviews? Okay. Another explanation for crib time can mean the extra time needed to perform a task compared to ableist time. Okay? Or is it that extra time wasted in the sense of being slow and unproductive and not living up to the norm? Okay? And also can be used as an analytical tool for understanding flexible temporalities for different people and not one fixed normal temporality. I think we need to consider the definition of crib time to enable us to carry out these types of interviews. When I was transcribing the interview with Johnny, I measured how long it took him to type an answer to one of the questions I asked him. There were more than 10 minutes that elapsed between my question until he finished typing 2 sentences that included his response. And yes, I think one of the main features that need to be applied. And yes, I think one of the main features that need to be applied in research and disability is flexibility. Within that interpersonal space, we need to feel our partner, our interviewee. Have we made sure that the physical and human environment that the interview takes place in is a comfortable space? Have we created together a feeling of mutual trust? Are we flexible? Are we enabling various modes of communication? And are we not measuring the length of answers to our questions, but rather appreciating the time and effort invested to share with us personal experiences? There is a need to enable breaks during interviews like these. I interviewed Johnny at home and spent an hour and a half with him. From time to time, he'd need to get up, run to his bedroom, stand by the window, go to the kitchen, and then come back when he felt he could sit himself down and share his thoughts and feelings with me. I have only begun to discuss issues relating to time and space from a methodological perspective when interviewing people with a disability in general, and in zooming in on interviews with people with complex communication needs. But I'd like to bring Catherine Campbell talking about ableism as an obstacle. And I think the concept of disabled people's futures by positioning ableism and not disability as the obstacle to a life course, enabling a future both imagined and real, is a bit also what we just spoke about just before. And if I think of what we've heard and discussed over the last couple of days here at this conference, I think there's a general consensus among us all, that there is a need to be out there, to be aware, and make others aware of how to ensure that the temporalities of time and space in so many aspects of life are enabling, respecting, offering equal opportunities for everyone to be part, to participate, and to be heard. Thank you.
לגמרי, לגמרי. We have time for questions. Neely, someone else? Ronnie, you want me to say sorry that I didn't give you time before for a question?
I want to say sorry?
Me? Yeah. Do you want a question?
Absolutely. I can always ask questions.
No one else? Just Neely? Okay.
I can be asked one.
Yeah. You can ask together.
Relational autonomy?
Thank you so much, Tamar. I wanted to ask you about the practice of waiting as an interviewer. What are you doing in that time of waiting for an answer or waiting for the person to relax or to think about what he's going to write? And how can you contain this in-betweenness of your relationship when there is no purpose, or not purpose, because there is a purpose, there is no protocol of what to do, and how you can contain relationship in that time without make you feel uncomfortable, or he or she feel uncomfortable, or how the communication goes when it's becoming wide on time.
Just a quick comment following Neely. It's interesting. First of all, thank you very much. Thank you very much for your really interesting talk. Interestingly, whenever I have to instruct my students how to conduct an interview, my first tip is to be patient. So ask a question, and don't be afraid of waiting, or don't be afraid of silence. And this is the best way to illustrate, induce answers, and respect the comments of the answers of the participants. So I don't know. It's like I'm sorry to use it, but your participants, Mariela, you talked yesterday about the framing of accessibility as something which is, of course, benefiting everyone. So I'm using the same metaphor, but it is. So you can, it's a very good way to think about interviews or making research in general, not just about with people, with communication, different communication needs or whatever. So it's just in a comment.
I will take also from Anat, and you will answer together. Okay.
Thank you so much. I wanted to ask if what was the part of the caregivers, the parent or the other caregivers? Was there any tension there, or were they trying to? What was the nature of their participation in the interview?
Related. Thank you. Yes, thank you for this very interesting presentation. I'm curious about the idea of relational autonomy, and especially if there was a, let's say, problematic relationship between the caregiver and the person you were interviewing, how that would have affected your research, and if you would have known that, or if it would have come up, and if there's any workarounds.
I hope I remember everything, and if not, you'll remind me. Nearly. So because we're talking about conversational partners, usually, as I mentioned, there were some that were interviewed on their own, and there were others that were interviewed with whoever they chose to be interviewed with that knew them best. So usually it was more with the autistic that needed those breaks to walk around, to come back. And then there's someone else in the room also. So you could just do small talk there and then just wait till he reorganizes himself and feels like he's able to come back and talk, type, and that's okay. And I think also, Ani, maybe a bit to do with what you mentioned. There was a lot of need for patience also when I sat with others, like the CP adolescents, that it just takes time and you have to wait, and sometimes it doesn't come out like they want to and they have to correct the typing. And as I mentioned, whoever could talk, even though their speech was not clear, did try and talk. And then that brings in another part of what I try to kind of say about what Jake said, that if they're not understood, then they just forget it and they move on. That was very intimidating to me because I did want to make sure that they were understood and that I understood them. And that was also, like, if I didn't get what they were saying in a gentle way, I would try and say, well, I'm not sure I understood you. Did you mean? Or can you try and explain that or expand on that? And then hopefully get the gist of what that was and not making my own explanations, because I think a lot of what I heard, which I did not go into the themes, but many times they did say to me that they're very frustrated with society that doesn't have the patience to wait for them to finish what they have to say, and they complete their words, their sentences, assuming they know what they're going to say, but not necessarily. Okay. So in most cases, and it was definitely, it's a question, I think, Anat, because when we talk about the main, like my main goal of this research, and I did have also a quantitative part, a different part, but I think I was interested in hearing perspectives of adolescents, not necessarily with their parents present, so that they could talk about everything and anything. And I don't feel that when there were conversational partners present, they did not take over the conversation in any way. I'm just not sure that the adolescents felt comfortable to raise issues that may have to do with tensions with their parents. But they did not take over the conversation in any way. They were just there to be like that technical support, that if anything goes wrong or something needs to be, or to feel a bit more of that respect or ability or whatever they needed for their self-esteem or whatever it was that needed to be present so that they could feel comfortable and be themselves. Kevin, did I relate to what you said?
I think I thought more of the interviews were with parents or caregivers. So I was curious of how those relationship dynamics could limit what people would tell you.
Okay, so when I interviewed parents separately without their children. They weren't present there. It was separate. Is that okay? Anyone else?
Thank you. My voice ran out. Thank you so much. Really, really interesting. My question is about, I guess, the analysis stage where you have the data and it could be a very short transcript. How do you work with that? And does it actually mean you can give more space to everything that was said? And yeah, interested in your comments.
Okay, so I think before the thematic analysis, you heard in my voice that I did say I was planning on videotaping these interviews. And I think it has a massive effect of when you talk about trying to analyze. There's a lot there that happens in those in-between spaces of what the body gestures, what are the voices they're trying to say that they're not yet expressing, or the time that it takes. And I definitely missed out on that. And I don't know I think if I would do it again, maybe I would think about it. But again, I think those ethic issues come up again and again. And it's not an easy decision when you come to meet someone that you don't have a previous acquaintance with. Can you videotape? But I'm convinced that videotaping, Michal can say that she videotapes it. You don't? Oh, okay, for the same reason okay. But I definitely think it's another aspect that could add. Okay, now regarding the, I think I did try to take whatever it was that was said there and to try and find those main themes that were definitely heard again and again from the different teens that I interviewed. Specifically with my analysis, I chose to try and take the focus of what the teenagers said and see how what their parents said were an extra, giving it more strength. And the other thing I think that was, I did not go back to my participants to make sure that it was understood, but I did use an adult group of AAC users that I met on Zoom. I had sent them before the main themes that I found and a short video explaining what my research was about. And I met them on Zoom. They're an advocacy group from Beit Izi Shapiro here in Israel. And I had met with them for a Zoom meeting, and I asked them, do you think I understood correctly what I was told? And they're from their life experience were able to tell me, did I understand them correctly?
Can I also say something about that? I want to reflect on this, and also you have in your schedule a 15-minute break, but we're going to take this break from you just so that we can have some sort of general discussion now, and you don't take the break to leave us. I have abandonment issues. I want to reflect on this point and question, but also maybe to...
Goffman has a really nice concept to describe the space.
So to take the opportunity to say something specifically about this question, but also if we can take this up to a larger discussion, I think it takes me to the thoughts, because Tamar and myself, of course, had a lot of contact during this time and while she was writing her results. So I think part of this was also, correct me if I'm wrong, Tamar, but also in conversations with us, because I was not there, of course, when she interviewed. I envy the way that I think I would have had difficulty doing what she did, and I think it's a very difficult task to go in to do these interviews, but I only had the text, so I only got like what you questioned, Ilan, I only got the text. So many times we would be making these conversations, and when I read a short sentence, Tamar would be able to tell me the whole story, even though she did not videotape what happened in there, what was he referring to, what occurred in the situation. Maybe it's it wasn't like methodologically written as an observation. It was the interview, but I think there are many things that you have to look at even during the quiet time and during all the things that actually happen in the room. So this is one thing I think it's really important when you have the possibility with someone to talk to and to reflect and to keep on thinking about everything that was happening beyond the words. But the larger point that I think it takes me into, you might have heard me say this before, you took me off the beach on my sabbatical. It's been a long time since I've touched upon research. I made it a point in my sabbatical to not do research. And this was just, for myself, a really, really exciting day because there were many different topics that were spoken about, but there were also many, many different methodologies. And like I'm getting out of here sort of excited and I'm like, wow, I should do this, I should do that, I should do this. There are so many different tools that should be used. And I admit you got me excited. I'll think if I come back or not. But I am, like it really has me excited. There are so many ways to do these things. And then I think about all the difficulties in publishing. Because I think when we go out to journals and they're like, oh, these are all the sentences you got? Oh, this is participatory research. There's not, what's in there? Is this real research? I don't know how many of you might resonate with this. I feel that the journals that are out there are still not understanding many of the things that we're doing and the importance of publishing these pieces and the importance of looking, like there were so many things here that are not traditional research. And is the field open to looking into all these other types of research and seeing them as valid, important, decent, whatever, and how we might open this? And that one.
I want to respond to what you were saying, Shirley. And maybe throw it back at you a bit, because I think there are some journals where you can publish, but also there are ways of sharing our research and our work that are not necessarily in journals or in peer-reviewed journals. And how do we as faculty in the university value these sort of resources? And what do we tell our students? Do we allow them to use resources that are not from the highly rated journals, so that they will have access to people who are usually being marginalized and materials that are usually being marginalized within this industry of academic publishing?
She threw it back at me, sorry. I'm not hugging it. She asked to throw it back at me. I hear you. I think it's really, really important. I just want to make a point also, because they were supposed to be here, but we got things confused and they came yesterday, that actually the center also has a collaboration with Beit Easy Shapiro and their team of participatory action research. They were in the conference yesterday, a few of them that came. And I think it's one way of showing, we as a center and as an academic center believe in this type of research. And for us, they're part of the center, and we highly value this. Very important, but I think we still have a long way to go. I think we need to have a place for there, and I can tell this to our students. And if I can say something, when we shared this day, Those of you sitting here might know that we did not share it widely. We sent specific invitations to our favorite people that are sitting here right now. But beyond this, we also sent it to our team at our school and said, you know, it's going to be about disability studies, but we believe the topics of research, if you put aside the general area, would be relevant to all of you. But you can see how many people beyond us came. But that's a question mark because, you know, it's always difficult to come. You're teaching, you have other things to do. In any case, I think we still have a really, really long way to go.
Thanks. I'm going to say a couple of things. One thing related to time and publishing. I'm doing participatory research with people who type. You saw one in the second video that you showed. And it takes a very, very long time to do this kind of research. And one thing that I've been contemplating is, so it takes a very long time, but in my experience, or the way I feel, is that it actually produces a lot of materials. Like sometimes I find myself kind of overwhelmed by how much material it produces. So I was kind of trying to negotiate a way to kind of maybe pull out. So instead of the way you traditionally do research, you wait, you collect your data, right? And you wait until you're finished collecting your data, and then you analyze and you publish. But I think participatory research, because it's long term, and I think your perspective on it changes during the research or while you're collecting your data. I think there has to be kind of a way to kind of like pull out kind of like sections, you know, like, oh, here's an interesting idea. I have something to say about this right now. Maybe I can write up something. But then the struggle for me was that maybe I'm not in a position to write an entire article on it right now, because the time that it will take me to do that, you know, it would be too long. And then I think the challenge is to find, and kind of I can relate to what you were saying, Shirley, the challenge is really to find where to publish things like that so it will reach the audience that you want to reach and be taken seriously, but at the same time will allow you a flexible enough format that you can write that kind of thing. And I also want to say something about, kind of tie it back to Nidhi, what you were saying before, and it has to do with the idea of like how much materials you produce. And I think we have a tendency to overestimate verbal language. We have a tendency to overestimate spoken language. That's the first thing. I work with people who don't use spoken language, but then the tendency is to kind of overestimate verbal language. But so I don't do interviews. I actually work with them, so it's good, like we do the research together. And I'm also, when I work with them, I'm also the facilitator. I also support their typing. So I actually have a lot to do while they type. But at the same time, like, I don't find that it's a long time to wait. I find that there's a lot going on in the room while they're typing. And I really, I can really relate to what you were saying. That there's an observational aspect to it, because like I'm constantly observing everything that's going on in the room, also so I can accommodate their needs and what they need at any particular moment. And part of, so it's not all that I do, but one thing that I do that I think relates to what you were saying, is I write down, so since they're all typing, so I also type what I say. So I use spoken language, but I also type everything that I say. And what I do is I also type some observations that I have. So if they use, like nonverbal ways of communicating, like they'll stand up, or they'll make noises, or stuff like that. They'll smile. And I also do stuff like that, right? So I document that, like I also write that down, but I do it very transparently. Like I don't do it behind their back or in my notebook. Whatever I do it so we can all see it. And that's sort of a way for me of mitigating like that sort of gap that you described. Sorry, that was kind of long.
You had me thinking, Michal, that part of this might be, I don't know how to state it, but maybe like a more decent, correct way of forming a relationship instead of we just come to the room, we ask the question, we wait for the response, we go on to the next one. It's like, okay, it's okay to take the time and it's okay to form this relationship in the room, and it's part of what's happening inside the room at this time.
I would like to refer to these silencers and time waiting from a psychoanalytic perspective. Because in the treatment, there's a lot of silence and waiting, and in psychoanalysis, there's a concept of reverie, which is stands that the therapist is kind of attending his own or her own thoughts, feelings, sensations, whatever comes, in a and does not prefer anything specific, but just being attentive to whatever goes up. And this can teach us a lot about ourselves, of course, but also about the dynamic in the room and the other person. And there is also research that is psychoanalytic informed, like qualitative research that is informed by these concepts, and the interviewers, they use these psychodynamic understandings and concepts as an integrative part of analysis of the interviews and the dynamics. So it really, it's not only something that you can do while you're waiting, and you can also integrate that within your research, and that's very interesting. I can send you some work on that, and it's really interesting to think about integrating that in situations where there's a lot of silence because of or waiting, because of the structure of the communication, or yeah.
That just made me think how therapists and workers, facilitators, service givers, caregivers can be researchers, that this connection is actually out there, where you have the trust and the connection with the person. You have ways and techniques of communication, and I think that can be true for many different kinds of relationship, that can be both therapeutical or professional or service centered, and also research. We can take the research into the room.
Can be any other thoughts, or in general, if you have other thoughts beyond the quiet and the silence.
About the whole day.
The whole day, yes. Something you wanted to ask from the beginning and I didn't let you.
We don't have such strong memories. We can talk about the food.
One thought I had during your session, that you said that you want to use a tool that they can express themselves outside the normal interview, and to me it really reflected to Irene's lecture in the morning, that to bring other tools than the normal traditional interview in order to generate self-made responses that can open different issues. So that's maybe an interesting connection between both methodologies.
If there's anything else, happily, and if not, I want to say a couple of things to close. There's nothing else? Okay. So just to wrap it up, a couple of things that I wanted to say. First, to say thank you to everyone who presented. It's not easy, I think, at times taking your research and bringing out not only the topic, but also specifically the methodology. And I think for me, at least, it was a really, really exciting day, and I appreciate everyone that gave us from your time. I wanted to thank a couple of people that are important to thank. One of them, of course, is Jim Bloom, who is the donator for our conference, for the Millie Bloom Conference. It's the third year that we're able to hold this conference, the first year that we're able to have it face-to-face, and this is thanks to Jim's contribution to this, so it's an opportunity to thank. The other very, 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 very important person to thank is Tamar, of course. Yes. Tamar, who's been with us for the entire 2 days, who's transcribing. We keep having her, one, because we love her. Second, because beyond being a transcriber, I think she can be officially counted as a disability studies researcher on her own. And understanding the language, we've been talking a lot today about language, and I think it's beyond just transcribing, because Tamar really understands the language that we are speaking, and we appreciate you, Tamar. To say thank you to the team, to Anat, to Nili, to Roni, to Hadar. They've been really working very, very hard. I think they put together a great program from yesterday and today, and thank you very much for all of this. Technically, if you can leave us with your name tags, we'll give it back to you when you come back to us next year. If you don't come back to us next year, we might put a different name on it, but we welcome everyone who's here to come back to us, and we'll have you here again. If anyone has any, it's been a long time since we've been face-to-face, so if any of you have any feedback, what we could have done better, different, feel free to send us over email. We'd like to learn about our next coming up years. Anything else I should say? Of course. To say thanks to Irene and to Ilan, who came to us from far away, but don't worry, we'll be coming back to you. And to the library, and to the spaces. And we enjoyed your talks. I think it was such a wonderful addition, and for us, following COVID, and I don't think if all of us have went away already to conferences abroad, but you're bringing with you the international context to us, and we're very, very thankful for that. Hadar might have some business to close with you, I think, so don't run away before she tells you maybe some things she needs from you. I really do appreciate. We loved having you here. If you stay for a few more days, we're still here for any questions, anything that comes up and you need our help. We're still not physically here, but here.